Next speaker is Joe Knetsch.
Okay, folks, we're going to start it right off here and kick her into gear.
Joe, they can hear you downstairs, too.
They can hear me downstairs, which is fine. That's with or without the mic or so. One never knows. I do have a loud voice. I was a school teacher for enough years to make it go across, so therefore you'll hear it. Primarily what I'm here to talk about is the history of the surveying of this area. Why is that important historically? Well, stop and think about it. Other than occasional military personnel, God, it's bright lights. I keep forgetting that's the limelight, isn't it? Other than military personnel, the first people who left notes for us, Native Americans didn't leave a lot, as far as notification is concerned and all that kind of thing, were the U.S. deputy surveyors, which makes them rather the main primary source for actual descriptions of land in this area at the time, or any other time, or any other place in Florida especially. The public land survey system, of course, the rectangular system here in Florida, is different from Georgia and different from the other original 12 or other 13 colonies, plus New England, of course, Maine, etc., and Tennessee and parts of Kentucky and all of what was used to be Western Virginia. The result being that was basically the old English style of meets and bounds, etc. Florida does not have that. Okay, right away you understand the problem we have in this area, because we don't go by the physical description of the land anymore. We are now going by artificial lines drawn by the surveyors as they go out in the area. We should tell you, first of all, when I first got involved with the Aucilla River, gives you an idea, I did a report for the Department of Environmental Protection. Today it was then Natural Resources. This is available at the State Library of Florida, so you can go take a look at it anytime. I don't think they have one in circulation, but you can look at it. It's not too long. And it basically dealt with the possibility of navigability of the Aucilla River from the Georgia line all the way down to the Gulf. And you're all going to say, what? We've got not all rides, and they're not going to get through that. By the way, the original pioneers of the area in 1831 put in a petition to try to destroy nut haul rides so they could make this navigability all the way through. Oh, that's going to scare the heck out of a lot of people here in this county. Scared a lot of people in the territorial period too, I might add. It didn't get funded. The Army Corps of Engineers, by the way, had argued against it also. We just want to put that the Corps did have something to say back then. Also, by the way, the whole story, by the way, on the canals will be in the new book coming out, we hope, at the end of next month, or the end of this month, excuse me. It's called Ports, Forts, Canals, and Wars, an Uncommon History of Tallahassee and the Surrounding Area. And it deals with the canal boom in the 1830s and 40s here in North Florida, and that's what this part of this essay is all based on that. Now I can put that aside. You always have to put your promos out first. That way people get thinking about, well, he does something good. Well, let's talk about the problems surveyors had, first of all. Many people don't even think about it, but you should. How do you get trained personnel on a frontier system like Florida, which is only, in 1821 when the Americans first started coming here? Where are they going to get that educated elite or group to come on down? It's a question you have to stop and think about. Now, we should point out to you right away that the U.S. deputy surveyors are bonded professionals. They're the people who are actually putting up to $5,000 to $10,000 on a cash-free frontier, we might add, as bonds to be able to get the contract to survey the land. So right away you have to have contact, you have to have people with money, you have to have people who have connections, those kind of things right away just to be a deputy surveyor. Once you get that out of the way, then you've got to turn around and go buy the materials. You got to get the wagons to haul out the goods. You got to buy the food that your crew is going to work with. You have to, stop and you have to get the chain, make sure it fits perfectly into those little holes in the Surveyor General's office. You have to do some things that you don't even think about these days. Like, how much weaponry should we take, seeing that the fierce Seminole and Miccosukee tribes of Florida are out there? Which, by the way, the surveyors, for the most part, didn't have to worry too much about, but they did, and they should have, because you never know. It is a wartime situation almost the entire time they're out there surveying in the territorial period. So it's those kind of questions you stop and think about. How much, how many people are we going to have? You have to have at least an axeman or two. You have to have a couple of people running the chains. You have to have somebody being your campman. Quite frequently, that was an African American, I might add. And as a result, you've got at least 6 or 7 people who are under your immediate command. And you've got to organize all this. And you've got a contract with the government. Once you've got the bonding out of the way, you've got a contract to do X number of miles. We're not talking how many squares, how many miles you are going to survey. And frequently the first ones were 600 to 800 miles per contract, which they're supposed to do in 4 to 6 months. Because nobody surveys in the rainy season in Florida because it's just too dangerous. Medical theory of the day is what? All the miasmas coming out of the swamp and giving you yellow fever and all the most vicious things you've ever seen in your entire life. They're going to come out there and kill you. And by the way, it did. When Benjamin Clements did his survey out in Escambia County, along the Escambia River, he was the only member of the crew not to catch yellow fever. That meant 8 other people got yellow fever, including 2 of them who died, including his son, Hosea Clements. How would you like to be the father of the man on your crew who died? It's not fun to see that, folks. And Ben Clements was a good surveyor. He really was. And he's the one who did, by the way, not only the west line going all the way out to the Escambia River, including the 6-mile jog near Bruce, Florida. That, by the way, was due to a thing called Choctawhatchee Bay. Surveyed through water very easily. Doesn't leave any markings on the land. But he also did the Prime Meridian line, all the way from the Gulf to the Georgia line. So when you drive up Meridian Road, think of Ben Clements and his son Hosea, because they did most of the work. Really fine gentlemen, they really were. So, by the way, that's Colonel Benjamin Clements. He served with Andrew Jackson in the Tennessee Volunteers. Most, by the way, of the early surveyors were military officers, majors and colonels, almost all of them. Now stop, why? Who else has to have the training to measure things, know the distances you have to travel? Many of them are artillerists, so therefore they have to know a good deal about mathematics and figuring out what kind of arc you're going to use to fire the weapon and how much you're going to do. They're not all West Point trainers. By the way, don't forget, West Point's not even active in the early part of the time of our surveying here. But they are men who had served for many years with Andrew Jackson or with William Henry Harrison, a couple of them. It's an amazing group. And by the way, you're also what? You're an organizer. You are a leader. One thing we seem to forget, that every single surveyor who surveyed in the state of Florida was a leader in his community. One of them, by the way, James Exum, not only was he a leader in his communities, but he was also the Grand Master of the Lodge, the Masonic Lodge for the entire state of Florida. He's a handsome man with a high forehead, big shock of hair, and a beautiful beard. He was definitely a leader. You look into those man's eyes and you know you're going to follow him somewhere. These are the kinds of people they have out there. One of our surveyors surveyed in Florida, not only in Leon County, but also in Jackson County, and became the sheriff of Jackson County. Matter of fact, he serves as sheriff in Leon County and in Jackson County at one time. The only person I found who did that. In other words, these people are frequently elected local officials. These are not slouches coming in off the swamps of Florida, wearing Davy Crockett coonskin hat kind of stuff, okay? These are really, truly leaders. Arthur Murray Randolph, who was one of my favorite surveyors, the man who developed San Luis Mission as a plantation first. By the way, he married some gal named Laura Duval, as in the daughter of William Pope Duval, who left a beautiful painting of that mission, or that house that they created there, the plantation, which Dubois later bought, and was finally taken out in 1926 when the Messers built that Spanish Revival home that you see at San Luis Mission today. Arthur began the development of that as a plantation, and he had a large number of slaves, over 60, and he surveyed and did a lot of extra work. By the way, he is Dr. Arthur Murray Randolph. Yes, he went through, along with his brother, James Randolph, the other doctor here in town. They came down together. And they are indeed the nephews of Edmund Randolph, Attorney General of the United States. These are people not from poor families. These are well-to-do people, many of them well-connected, looking to expand the family fortune somewhere along the line. They're an amazing group of men. They really are. And they have to be organized, they have to be leaders, they have to be ready to go. And they're not all going to make fortunes. The greatest surveyor we had in this state was Henry Washington, who's laid out a lot of the early Spanish land grants, especially along the east coast of Florida. Into this day, you can measure and take the measures of what that man did, and they are still very accurate, even with the latest stuff that Alan's going to tell you about later on. These guys were good. They're not slouches. They're not on bar stools in St. Augustine, as a lot of people trying to maintain. That's just a fib to get people to doubt the survey. And don't forget, once the corner is set, recognized by the United States Land Office, it is there permanently, error or not. You cannot change them, and don't screw with them. That's a criminal offense. You can be arrested and $5,000 to $10,000 fine put on your head. You do not want to do that. We had one gentleman at one of our state parks pulled one out about 5 years ago. In good shape, I might add. It was a Henry Washington post, too. And it was still there in the spot it was supposed to be in. And he thought he was doing us a favor by pulling it out and showing it to people. And, gee, look what I found. And then we warned him that you could be fined up to $5,000 to $10,000 and serve some time in jail. Yeah, he tried to go back out and put it in, but no, he finally got a local surveyor to go out and do it properly. And he didn't put in the original post that was preserved, and they had to put in a newer one to make the monument. It does happen. Now, the other thing, too, happened when a lot of those lines were originally set, particularly a poor guy named R.C. Allen, who, by the way, surveyed right here in Jefferson County, we might add, and had a major problem later on. We talked, and I think I heard Rochelle talk about the Appalachians and how sophisticated they really are. These are people who are not stupid. These are people who knew how to exist on a land that we're just looking at for the first time and saying, God, how did they do that? When you stop to think about it, Native Americans knew exactly what U.S. surveyors were doing. And frequently, and this happened a lot with R.C. Allen because he was in an area where there was a concentration of Native Americans, mostly Seminoles, they destroyed the original survey marks to make sure that they could not settle in the area for a while, at least delay it somewhat. That was intentionally done. They're not stupid. These people know how to survive. And if you take a look, please do sometime, at the letters of Benjamin Hawkins and his cruising through the Creek Nation in the 1780s and 90s, and you're going to find what? You're going to find 3-crop rotation, penning of animals to use the manure for fertilization. You're going to see the headman of the local area, usually in a 1- or 2-story cedar shake house, just like you would find somewhere else. Matter of fact, my contention has always been that a lot of these frontiersmen, why they hated the Indians so much, was they saw these people were living better than they are. Dang, we got to get rid of people who are better than us. You getting the idea? These people were sophisticated, they were intelligent, they knew how to do it. And they, of course, saw the superiority of certain metal work, which is why they wanted to trade so much with us. Because we had things that they could use and use effectively, or melt down and use effectively against us. All those things you have to think about. Also, by the way, you should also think about the contracts and how they read. The contracts and instructions to surveyors are extraordinarily important. And I'm very proud to say the DEP in the state of Florida has all of these things online for you. Repeat, all of these things are online. The contracts, the bonds, the revised instructions, the plats in color, and of course the field notes are all online. You can get them. There's no secret. These are public information for you. And do use them, because you're going to find out just how meticulous these gentlemen were. By the way, was there anybody who surveyed or attempted to survey from the bar stool in St. Augustine? Yes, one. And he was turned in by 2 surveyors. They were not going to put up with a profession that had a Duncan like that. It was just not good enough. Therefore, but anyway, getting back to the contracts and the instructions, read them. The instructions are extraordinarily important. If there are special instructions, you really got to read them, because those things will tell you what they want to have done. And one of the first things you're going to read in the instructions of 1830-31 that were issued, and prior to that, other surveyors that we took in from Louisiana and Mississippi Territory, always think that they're doing one purpose. What is the purpose of a U.S. land survey? It is to get land on the market that's saleable and usable for farming. That's it. It raises money. It's next to the tariff. It is the biggest funding for the federal government at this time. Those surveys are extraordinarily important. And one of the first instructions you read are what? And Robert Butler got a personal letter from the surveyor, or from the General Land Office in Washington, telling him, if you come across marsh and worthless land, worthless meaning not farmable, avoid it, jump over it. Later on, we will come out and get it as piecework if it's necessary. That tells you something right away, why you have to come back later on, and particularly when they pass a thing in 1850, the most important land act in Florida history, called the Swamp and Oversold Land Act. Out of the 35 million acres Florida got from the United States government, 20 million of them were via the Swamp and Overflowed Land Act. Tells you how much water had to be removed from the land. What you see today is not Florida, as the Native Americans and those first deputies ever saw. It had immensely amount more land underwater than you can shake a stick at. And again, the first 3 years of Florida, when Robert Butler, a very intelligent man, was in charge as Surveyor General of Florida, his major problem was most of those surveys had to be thrown out because they were done, well, the surveyors couldn't get to the land because it was too wet. It was covered with water. And that included land around Lake Emonia, which those of you who've been up there already know why that problem is. Now, the other thing, the instructions, of course, are very, very specific in what they wanted to get done. Another major problem, of course, is besides hiring competent help, which is difficult on a frontier with nothing but pioneers who are not necessarily educated, is basically the rate of pay. You know how much they got? $3 a mile. And the first surveyors got $3 a mile. Wow! That doesn't add up to a great deal of money, by the way, when you stop and think about it, when you've paid for the wagons, paid your help, paid for the food. And then luckily, they didn't have to worry about insurance cost. Think about it. Okay, so you got all those various problems coming up, and plus you're a cash-starved frontier. Then they come up with other things like meandering along the way. There was so much swamp, so much mushy, marshy land that a lot of the main rivers, like the Aucilla, were never meandered, pure and simple. As a matter of fact, when you take a look at the 7,700 water bodies we at one time had in Florida, only 235 of them were ever meandered. Tells you something right away, doesn't it? Well, let me talk about a couple of things specific to Jefferson County. Particularly, of course, was the various lines of survey for between Georgia and Florida. We had three major lines, as you know. First one run in 1825 by Daniel McNeil. Georgians weren't too happy with it. No, they weren't. They were saying that took too much land from Georgia. We need to have that thing resurveyed. So they petitioned Congress and they got a different survey. By the way, his survey talks about the Foul Town Swamp in Jefferson County. As you all recall, the first major battle during the First Seminole War was the Foul Town, and that's not this one. Matter of fact, you can find it just south of Bainbridge, Georgia. They had a second survey, which was also done, and Watson survey, and there were a lot of questions about that. Again, more petitions from Georgia questioning it. And finally, in 1859, and it's not the last survey I might add, Benjamin F. Whitner got the contract to do the survey. It was actually his son, Benjamin Whitner Jr., who did the actual work. I've had the pleasure of actually sitting at the same desk in which he did that line on. Just knocked over somebody's ticker. Not only that, but there was a reason for that, a very interesting one. You see, a guy named R.H.W. Hodgson, who later became postmaster at Cedar Key after the Civil War, was asked to do some work along the line. And he noticed something, and two members of his crew informed him of it. Says, well, when you're going across the Alapaha and the upper Withlacoochee, we didn't adjust for drifting downstream. Uh-oh. And those of you who know the Alapaha and the upper Withlacoochee know they have a pretty strong current. And if you don't adjust, you're not going to have a straight line going across there, folks. No way possible. So Hodgson brought this to the attention of the Surveyor General, who immediately ordered Arthur Murray Randolph to go out and take a look at it and verify it. Randolph comes back, he looks, says, yep, he's right. So they had to run a new survey, and that's when the Whitner-Orr line was finally done. The Whitner-Orr line was later declared the official boundary between Georgia and Florida. There was a later survey, by the way, by C.F. Smith in 1874, and he found some things that were pretty interesting too. And I want to note one thing. Every time the Aucilla River crossed the Florida line from Boston, Georgia, headwaters area, as you all know, they never found less than 2 feet of water in it. Now, why is that important? Why do I have to know that 24 inches is an important thing? Because when the canal movement got kicked in, and they were building things like the Slave Canal down on the Wassissa River, or they wanted to build a canal going through what is now Nuttall Rise, how many inches of water did they need to float a major barge or a barge carrying out the cotton and wood products of this area? Did they need 2 feet? No, they only asked for what? 18 inches. 18 inches, folks, to get a flatboat barge down a water body carrying a marketable crop like cotton or wood or tar and other things that are wood products. By the way, that is the same amount of inches that the British needed along the coast near New Smyrna. It's the same amount of information and the same depth of others. And frankly, and Bruce knows this better than most, when I look at the records, I always want to know how many inches does a boat draw. That's why. Because if they can do that in the colonial and then in the territorial period, they can do it at any time. And therefore, that makes a water body navigable, by my definition. Airboating does not count. Never was, never will. They didn't have a lot of airboats back then, I might add. Now, I know I'm running short on time, so let me tell you something. The canal boom was a very big boom, as you know. And here, of course, in Jefferson County, that was a rather important thing because we had the Wassissa-Aucilla Canal Company created by the state legislature, or territorial legislature, in 1831, asking for those 18 inches to build a canal. It was sponsored by, are you ready for this one? Now, for those of you who like genealogy, you'll love this, because one of the major people who backed this canal was Achille Marat, William Bellamy, Nuttall, of course, himself, as you would expect. The Gambles were involved in that, not only financing it, also willing to get involved with it, and also a number of other well-known figures. And the person, of course, backing it was Jefferson County's own Joseph White, whose beautiful wife, Florida, would tell you everything about it, wouldn't she? Those are the kind of people who were behind this. These are the leaders, the money power of the day wanting these canals. And they were going to hook this canal. Now, and I want you to visualize this now. They were going to go not only from Boston, Georgia, where 5 counties of Georgia, by the way, also signed a petition saying, we want this canal. We're going to build it. It's going to go down all the way, to connect with the St. Marks, and on the northern end, it's going to connect into the lakes up here at Miccosukee. It's going to then connect into the Occoquan River, which will be improved and go on down there. So you'll have an entire horseshoe or circle of this stuff, bringing materials from the 5 counties in Georgia and maybe 6, 7 counties in Florida, because they hadn't all been created yet. That's some dreaming, folks. That's visualizing. And also, of course, that would also mean probably they might even have thought of a connection with the Aucilla River. And later on, in 1947, they put forth the Port of Tallahassee project, which would indeed canalize the Aucilla River, the Aucilla Springs, through McBride Slough, up into the 200-foot or 200 yard, excuse me, separation between that and Munson Slough into the old Black Swamp or the Black Lake, as it was called in Spanish times. You can imagine that, ruining one of the finest natural resources in the entire United States, Wakulla Springs, before Tallahassee pumped all of its sludge down there. Little commentary on the environment, okay? But at any rate, those kind of things. In 1832, when that didn't go very well, Joseph White put in a petition signed by many of these people to get rid of the natural bridge in the Aucilla River, which would be, of course, part of that whole thing. By the way, it was revived under a different name or similar name with the Aucilla Canal Company in 1835. They did want to build this canal. It was part of a canal boom in the United States, begun, of course, by the Great Erie Canal in New York. Well, it gives you an idea then just how important this area was and why those surveyors are important. They're the ones who determine the routes and tells you how much water's in the area at the time, which direction the water is flowing. It gives you a real good idea of what the lay of the land was. And you're also going to see a thing called witness trees that I want to make you all aware of, especially the archaeologists, which are the majority of you in many ways. Be aware of certain theories about what is the most prominent thing. Witness trees are supposed to be the most permanent type of trees you're supposed to make a mark on so the following surveyors and landowners can find their property and measure it out properly. Well, you're going to see a lot of oak, a lot of hickory, a lot of cypress, but they were discouraged from using pine trees if they could, including longleaf pine, which they didn't really understand, I don't think, as much back then, but they did use them. But if you start looking at all of that, you might find a different vegetation pattern than what some people have theorized. Okay, thank you very much.